Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be breaking down my week number 5 wide receiver rankings and tiers for the 2024 fantasy football season. We're going to be breaking down my top 36 wide receivers for week number 5, and I'm going to be explaining to you guys why I have them ranked in each and every single tier. But before we can get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, then please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure you leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. So without further ado, let's get into my week number 5 wide receiver rankings and tiers for the 2024 fantasy football season. We begin with the must-start wide receiver 1 tier with my wide receivers 1 through 6. At number 1, we have CeeDee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers in Pittsburgh on Sunday Night Football. Now, I fully understand that this is not the most ideal matchup for CeeDee Lamb, right? There are far worse defenses in the NFL than the Pittsburgh Steelers, but we did just see the Indianapolis Colts and cool Joe Flacco carve them up like a Thanksgiving turkey, so I definitely think that CeeDee Lamb still has a ton of upside in this matchup. He was the wide receiver 4 last week up against the Giants in prime time on Thursday Night Football with over 100 all-purpose yards and a touchdown. I believe that CeeDee Lamb is still one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. I get that the Dallas Cowboys have had their woes this season, but CeeDee Lamb still belongs inside of the top tier at the wide receiver position. At number 2, we got Nico Collins. Nico Cousin, let's go bowling of the Houston Texans, going up against the Buffalo Bills at home in Houston. Nico Collins has been on an absolute tear this season. Wide receiver 13 for 37 and number 1. His one down showing was up against the cold-like Minnesota Vikings. That defense is elite. So going up against the Buffalo Bills defense that is banged up to the maximum, like their album just went platinum, I truly believe that Nico Collins should have yet another top 5 performance. At number 3, we got Jamar Chase going up against the Baltimore Ravens, a division rivalry matchup. Now, I understand that the Baltimore Ravens defense just shut the door on Josh Allen and friends last week, but I do believe that this matchup has the potential to be the most high-scoring game on the slate. Joe Burrow has been playing a lot better. Jamar Chase looks like he is in his normal form from the last couple of years, and that is going to result with him being ranked inside the top 5 or 6 every single week. At number 4, we got Justin Jefferson of the cold-like Minnesota Vikings going up against the New York Jumbo Jets in London. Now, the fact that this matchup is in London does give me some slight pause because games in London typically aren't these crazy firefights. You already have 2 great defenses going toe-to-toe, so maybe that ends up with Justin Jefferson not playing as well, but and this is a big but, shout out to Mia Malkova. This is Justin Jefferson we're talking about, one of the best, if not the best wide receivers in the National Football League. The Jets defense is solid, but ultimately, I still am going to stand with Justin Jefferson. I'm still going to believe in him. I was giving him the Sukalamink special all summer long, telling you guys to draft him, and I believe Justin Jefferson sits inside the top 6 this week. At number 5, we got Jaden Riley-Reed of the Green Bay Packers going up against the Los Angeles Rams in LA. When Jordan Love has been healthy, Jaden Reed has been the wide receiver 1 in week 1 in Brazil and the wide receiver 2 last week up against the Vikings, a rock hard defense. Last week, he had 7 receptions for 139 yards, 2 rushes, as well as a touchdown. Jaden Reed is the clear alpha wide receiver on this team. Romeo Doubs probably not going to play. No Christian Watson, which is going to lead to Jaden Reed seeing a bunch of balls come his way, and I think Jaden Reed has a good chance to finish inside of the top 5 yet again. At number 6, closing out the must-start wide receiver 1 tier, we got DK Metcalf of the Seahawks going up against the Giants at home in Seattle. The Giants are the type of matchup that has you salivating the night before thinking about it. DK Metcalf is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. Geno Smith is playing out of his mind at this moment. Geno Smith looks like one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL, and up against the Giants defense that can't stop a nosebleed, I expect DK Metcalf to go absolutely crazy. Now into the also must start tier, but these guys are just a little lower down the wide receiver ones, and that is going to begin with Maserati Marvin Harrison Jr. of the Arizona Cardinals going up against the San Francisco 49ers in San Francisco. Now, outside of week 1, where he only scored 1 fantasy point up against the Bills, he scored 29, 17, and 16 fantasy points. So even in games where the Arizona Cardinals are getting raw dogged, Marvin Harrison Jr. is still putting up solid production. I think the 49ers are going to be up in this game, and Marvin Harrison Jr. and Kyler Murray are going to be chasing them late on into the game like one of those Scooby-Doo cartoons where they're all chasing each other, running through a million different doors. I think Kyler Murray is going to be able to potentially keep this game close, and if they are chasing from the back, then they're going to have to throw the ball a ton, which is going to lead to Marvin Harrison Jr. potentially having one of the best games at the wide receiver position. I strongly believe that even in his rookie year, he is one of the best receivers in the game. Next up, we move to Diontae Johnson, wide receiver of the Carolina Panthers, going up against the Chicago Bears in Chicago. Now, the Bears matchup definitely is much harder for Diontae Johnson compared to last week against the Bengals and the week prior up against the Las Vegas Raiders. But this week, going up against the Chicago Bears, I'm not going to panic one bit. This motherfucker has seen 13 or more targets in both of the last 2 games with Andy Dalton. So even if the coverage is going to be difficult for Diontae Johnson, even if this matchup isn't as easy for Andy Dalton to get the ball out, he is still going to see so many targets. Volume is key in fantasy football, and Diontae Johnson is a volume king. Back-to-back weeks with the red rifle, he's been a top 10 wide receiver, and I think he does it yet again. Next up, we got Deebo Samuel going up against the Arizona Cardinals. Now, last week, Deebo Samuel was returning from injury, and he had a down game up against the Patriots as the wide receiver 46. The Patriots have a pretty decent defense. The Arizona Cardinals have a bottom-of-the-barrel defense, and Deebo Samuel, again, was coming off of an injury. So the fact that he didn't get completely peppered with targets shouldn't have been all that surprising. This week, I expect him to finish inside of the top 12. I feel very strongly about that. I believe that the targets are going to come early and often in this game. And without Christian McCaffrey, Deebo has been getting a lot more carries. I think he's got a good shot to find the end zone this week, which could catapult him into being a top-end option. Next up, we move to Stephon Diggs in a revenge game up against the Buffalo Bills. Outside of week number 2 up against the Bears, where he was the wide receiver 45, he's been the wide receiver 9, 15, and 15. And I believe that CJ Stroud is going to be a petty king here and throw the ball to Stephon Diggs a ton to make sure that Stephon Diggs has the game that he wants. Now, maybe the fact that they're laser eyes, locked on javelin from Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 back in the day, back in like 2009, maybe that is going to hurt the offense because they're just feeding him the rock. But even in games where they weren't, the goal wasn't, oh, let's just give the ball to Stephon Diggs. 6, 6, 12, and 9 targets. Stephon Diggs is the clear wide receiver 2 on this team. Like I said with Nico Collins, the Buffalo Bills defense is severely banged up. So I think Steph Diggs is going to have a great game. And I've already waved the white flag. I was wrong on Stephon Diggs. I thought Tank Dell would be the number 2. And that hasn't been more incorrect. That was just a fucking terrible take. Next up, we move to Chris Olave to close out this tier, going up against the Kansas City Chiefs in Kansas City. Now, the reason why Chris Olave isn't ranked higher is because of the matchup. The Kansas City Chiefs, while everyone loves to give the Gawk Gawk 9000 special to Patrick Mahomes, while everyone loves to fondle the Johnson of Andy Reid, that Kool-Aid man, fat bastard, the guys that deserve the most credit, at least this season and last season in the playoffs, is the defense. The defense in Kansas City has been fantastic, and with the Saints offense kind of shriveling up like your cock when you get out of water, Chris Olave probably will have a worse game than normal. Now, does that mean we have to completely bury him? Fuck no, baby. But I also don't think he deserves to be ranked inside of like that top 6 range. I think the volume will be there. I think Derek Carr will be able to get him the ball. I think Clint Kubiak's going to dial up a bunch of plays to get the ball into Chris Olave's hand as he is hands. He's not Shaquille Griffin. And he is one of the best, if not the best player on this offense. So I fully expect Chris Olave to have a solid game. But again, he's not in the upper echelon tier just because the matchup definitely isn't the most ideal. Next up, we move on into the high-end wide receiver 2 tier, beginning with Scary Terry F1 McLaurin of the Left Hands Up. Who are we? The Commanders going up against the Cleveland Browns. Terry McLaurin's another guy to where the matchup is kind of holding him down slightly. Back-to-back weeks inside the top 16, back-to-back weeks inside of the end zone. The targets have been huge for Terry McLaurin. Week 1 wasn't the case, only 4, but then 8, 6, and 10 over the last 3 games. Jaden Stormy Daniels is playing some downright incredible football. His accuracy, his completion percentage, every single game has been out of this world. Now, is he going to have an 80-plus completion percentage by the end of the season? Probably not. But honestly, with how he's playing, it's seeming more and more possible every single week. This matchup, though, up against the Browns, while I do think the defense might be a little bit fugazi, they definitely aren't the Cardinals or the Bengals or the Giants or the Bucks that the Washington Commanders have played thus far. But I don't want to truly pump the brakes because I believe heavily in Terry McLaurin's talent. I've believed this for years, that Terry McLaurin was great and that the quarterback was basically fucking this guy in the ass without the use of lube. But now, with Jaden Daniels, I think the ceiling is the moon. Next up, we got another guy in this game, Amari Cooper, going up against the Washington Commanders in Washington. Now, Amari Cooper simply cannot be ranked higher because of one man, and that is Deshaun Watson. Amari Cooper's getting all the targets. 9 targets, 8 targets, 12 targets, and 8 targets last week up against the Raiders. The problem is the ball isn't being thrown accurately. I made this joke a couple of weeks ago, but Deshaun Watson is trying to become the first NFL player to play football like it's basketball. The motherfucker's like bounce passing it to people like his name was Jason Kidd. I love Amari Cooper. I think he's one of the most underrated wide receivers in the NFL. This matchup has me bricked up underneath the desk, and Monica Lewinsky ain't down there. But what I'm going to tell you is the fact that Deshaun Watson, you smell it, you can smell him through the screen. He reeks to high heaven, which means that Cooper can't be ranked any higher, but I love the matchup here. Next up, we got DJ Moore. Now, DJ Moore has been in kind of a predicament here in Chicago. Him and Caleb Williams just don't appear to be on the same page just yet. There's been a couple of plays in multiple games where DJ Moore is wide open. There is not anyone within a school zone of him, and the ball goes flying over his head. It goes before him, and it just doesn't go his way. Well, he's getting it thrown to him from Caleb Williams, but the ball isn't being placed accurately. I think as the season continues, the targets are going to be a lot more efficient coming the way of Caleb Williams. We've seen DJ Moore put up big numbers last year with Tyson Bagent and with Justin Fields, so DJ Moore will be able to figure it out, but until that is the case, he's kind of just going to be stuck in this range, but I love the matchup here up against the Panthers. Next up, we got Michael Pittman Jr. Now, my assumption right now is that cool Joe Flacco will be under center for the Colts. Now they're saying it's a game time decision. So if Anthony Richardson plays, you are going to drop Michael Pittman Jr. down the rankings with quick haste. If cool Joe Flacco is in, Michael Pittman Jr. could flirt with being legitimately the wide receiver 1. And I believe that Joe Flacco will be in there. If Anthony Richardson gets the nod to play, then the whole passing attack just takes a huge boost in the opposite direction. They fall completely off the edge of the earth. Pittman was the wide receiver 58, 63, 54, and then last week, things go right with Joe Flacco, wide receiver 20. We've seen out of Michael Pittman Jr. last season with Gardner Minshew that the ceiling is incredibly high, so I feel confident ranking Michael Pittman here again, assuming that Flacco is in, but that isn't a lock just yet. Next up, we move on into the low-end wide receiver 2 tier with some wide receiver 3s as well, beginning with Titty Boy Tee Higgins of the Cincinnati Bengals going up against the Baltimore Ravens. Now, ever since he's returned, he has gotten better and better in each game. Been the wide receiver 59 in week 3, 37 last week. The targets have increased in both games, and I think this is finally the game where he cracks the top 24. Again, I love the game environment here. I don't think this is going to be a game where the Bengals are dancing on their grave. I think this is going to be a game that is high scoring back and forth, and I think they're going to look to get T. Higgins even more involved in this offense. I still believe my priors that T. Higgins is one of the better wide receivers in the NFL. If he was on a million other teams, he would be their wide receiver 1. So I'm going to continue to ride with my guy, T. Higgins. But until he shows something, he can't be ranked higher than this. Next up, we move to Zay Flowers, another wide receiver in this game, going up against the Cincinnati Bengals in Cincinnati. Now, for Zay Flowers, the biggest problem for him has been that the targets haven't been there. Why haven't the targets been there over the last 2 weeks? Because up against Dallas and up against the Buffalo Bills, they have been belt-to-ass matchups, meaning up against Dallas, for the first 3 quarters, they're up by a zillion. Last week, up against the Buffalo Bills, they were up by a zillion. So what do you do when you're up by a billion? You hand the ball to one of the best running backs in the NFL in Derrick Henry, and you drip the clock down and you get out of there. That leads to not a lot of passing occurring from Lamar Jackson and not a lot of volume going to Zay Flowers. Now, this game feels like a high-scoring back-and-forth affair. This doesn't feel like a game where the Baltimore Ravens go for a slam dunk and, shatter the backboard Shaquille O'Neal style. This feels like a back-and-forth matchup. And that should lead to Zay Flowers having a great game. But it's also not a guarantee because they're playing the Bengals, and the Bengals could get a train ran on them here. Next up, we got George Pickens. Now, I want to rank George Pickens higher than this because of what I saw last week. And what I've seen over the last 2 weeks is that the Pittsburgh Steelers have committed to throwing the ball more. They've thrown the ball 30-plus times in back-to-back games, which is what is needed for George Pickens to succeed. Because if you're just running the ball, run the ball gently down the stream, and not letting Justin Fields push the ball down the field, then George Pickens is going to be essentially irrelevant. Now, 2 games of this has led to him being the wide receiver 43 and 23. If he could just get into the end zone up against the Dallas Cowboys, a defense that seems to be overrated, I think George Pickens should have his best game yet. So I feel pretty comfortable ranking him inside of the top 24 as of right now. But before we move on into the rest of the wide receivers for these rankings, I would like to give you guys a quick word from our friends and our partner over at Underdog. Now, if you sign up using promo code Notorious or click on the link in the video description, you will receive a free pick plus a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. That free pick is going to be Dak Prescott higher than half of a total yard. You match that with any of the other players playing on Sunday or someone on Monday, and if both of your picks hit, you'll receive 3 times what you enter into your pick'em. If you put in multiple other picks, then the payout is going to be higher. Make sure that you sign up using promo code Notorious or by clicking on the link in the video description to get that free pick, plus a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. So back on into things here. The next wide receiver we're to discuss is Monsieur Brian Thomas Jr. Now, the Jaguars feel like they have a little bit of spark, a little bit of fire underneath the ass of the team. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like the Jacksonville Jaguars have one of the best offenses in the NFL. Fuck no, baby. But I am going to say, I do declare that the offense has looked better recently, especially last week up against the Texans. Now, are they one-hit wonders, or are they actually going to be able to do better? Doug Peterson, very much on the hot seat. The seat is as hot as it gets, but Brian Thomas Jr. has played well even in the bad games for the Jaguars. He was the wide receiver 9 last week, 9 targets, which he's had in back-to-back games, 6 receptions, 86 yards, 1 carry for 13 yards, and a touchdown. The matchup up against the Colts is mighty fine here, so I am excited for BTJ. And the reason why I haven't boosted him higher, frankly, is just not having enough trust in the Jaguars offense. Next up, we got Christian Kirk, the other Jaguars wide receiver. Christian Kirk, top 24 wide receiver in back-to-back games after starting off the season as the wide receiver 74 and 110, over 10 targets in back-to-back games last week up against the Texans in Houston. Houston, we had a problem because Christian Kirk was a big problem. 12 targets, 7 receptions, 61 receiving yards, and a tug in that game as the wide receiver 14. Again, back-to-back weeks inside the top 24. So we're going to rank him inside the top 24, again, in a great matchup against the Texans, though I will note, or not up against the Texans, up against the Colts, I will note it might rain a little bit in this game, which could potentially make it a little bit less higher scoring. Next up, we got Wan'Dale Robinson. Now, if you are not in PPR or half PPR, Wan'Dale Robinson should not even be ranked within this type of a tier. You can't rank him that high because Wan'Dale's a guy that sucks in targets with great efficiency. Amazing efficiency. This guy is a target hog. The problem is the targets don't really equate to doing much, right? Last week, he gets 11 receptions and 71 yards on 14 targets, but with no touchdowns. Now, Malik Neighbors is not going to play. Devin Singletary probably not going to play. It's not like they have Darren Waller there anymore, who I know sucked for the last couple of years, but they don't really have a lot of targets out there to throw the ball to. So I'm thinking we're going to get a healthy dosage of Wan'Dale Robinson here. Now, in most scenarios, like, the wide receiver, like, for instance, Nico Collins is gone. Stephon Diggs, plug and play, top 5 wide receiver. But that's not going to be the case. Like, Tyreek is out and Tua's playing. Waddle going up to the top 5, top 8. Wan'Dale's just nowhere near the skill level of Neighbors. Again, the targets will be there. You still have to rely on Daniel Jones. He's going to be fine. But if you're in like a standard league, he's probably not going to do jack shit. Next up, we move to Garrett Wilson. Now, I know there's going to be people in the comment section. Nick, how can you rank Garrett Wilson this low? Garrett Wilson was a top 10 receiver in fantasy drafts. Nick, you loved Garrett Wilson. Don't you remember? You were all over Garrett Wilson. Pause. You loved him. And yeah, that was true. But sometimes you're wrong, right? Sometimes you're right. When I talked about Nico Collins, when I was talking him up, when I talked up Jaden Reed, when I talked up Deontay Johnson, when I talked up Marvin Harrison, when I talked up Harry McLaurin, Amari Cooper, some of these guys, I feel pretty right on, even though Amari Cooper might be wrong. Some guys you get right, some guys you get wrong. So I'm here to take my losses, right? I was wrong on Zamir White, and I think I was wrong on Garrett Wilson, and I think this is Garrett Wilson's one last hurrah, as once Devontae Adams shows up, that's going to be a real kick to the cojones for Garrett Wilson. Now, maybe it just leads to, hey, Garrett Wilson's going up against now the second best corner, and that gets him more open. Yes, that is definitely possible. And while Devontae Adams hasn't officially been traded there, that is genuinely my take that he does get traded there. Garrett Wilson has not been good this season. Wide receiver 29, 33, 29, 60. Now, has he been such a disaster every single week to where if you play him, you end up feeling wrong about it? No, because he's still keeping your head above water, getting you like 12 fantasy points, but it hasn't been what you drafted him for. And now they are in London, games that are notoriously really weird. And now they're going up against the Vikings in one of the best defenses in the NFL. So I'm worried about Garrett Wilson. Now, I get Jaden Riley-Reed and Dontavian Wicks fucking Eiffel Towered this Vikings defense, but that was late in the game when the Vikings defense eased up after Brian Flores had Jordan Love looking like he played quarterback for the School of Blind and Deaf. So while I love Garrett Wilson and while I think he's really good, I'm not ranking him any higher than this. Next up, we move to JSN, Jackson Smith-Njigba, going up against the Giants. JSN has had a pattern season, meaning week 1, wide receiver 76, then wide receiver 8, then wide receiver 58, then wide receiver 32. Every other game, he's been a top 32 receiver. This week, technically, if he follows the pattern, he's going to suck ass, but I don't really believe too heavily in patterns here. I think JSN's going to have a good game. The Giants' defense isn't very good. Geno Smith has been cooking. Offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb has been, or Grubbs, whatever the fuck his last name is, has been able to call up a lot of plays to get JSN the football. The guy's incredibly explosive. I like him in this spot against the Giants, but DK is clearly the number 1 there. Next up, we got Dontavian John Wicks going up against the LA Rams in LA. Wide receiver 3 last week, scored 2 touchdowns, 5 receptions, 78 yards on 13 targets. Is he going to score 2 touchdowns again? Probably not, but should he get a reliable amount of targets without the other wide receivers there? Of course. Jaden Reed is still the clear number 1, but Dontavian Wicks will see a bunch of targets. He's a talented player. I talked about him all offseason long, especially if you guys were doing best ball drafts. I said, hey, you want to get Wicks on your team because Wicks is 1 injury away from being great for fantasy football in redraft. If you drafted him, I told you to hold him because if someone got hurt, he will elevate into potentially being this reliable wide receiver 3, the reliable flex option for you weekly, and that's exactly what he's going to be. And the upside was apparent last week up against the Vikings, and this is a great spot against the Rams. Next up, we got Rashid Shaheed going up against the Kansas City Chiefs in Kansas City. Tough spot for him defensively, and I told you guys this last week. Everyone and their mother was all over Shaheed against the Eagles. He goes crazy week 1, top 15. He's top 15 in week 2. And then everyone is like, okay, it's time to play Rashid Shaheed. He's done it twice in a row. Then everyone plays him. He puts up a big fat goose egg. And then in week 4, going up against the hot Atlanta Falcons in Atlanta, everyone says, you know what? Shaheed just screwed me over. I'm not playing Rashid Shaheed. And then what does Rashid Shaheed do? He finishes as a top 25 wide receiver. While the matchup doesn't seem ideal, the fact that he had 11 targets last week and not his normal 4 or 5 could lead to more consistency. And I think more than likely, he probably falls back down to the 4, 5, 6, 7 target range. But, and this is a big but, shout out to Sarah J, I think that Rashid Shaheed should be able to put up reliable top 32 numbers, and that's why I feel confident ranking him here. Next up, we got Josh Downs going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars in Jacksonville. This is strictly a Joe Flacco is in the game play. If Anthony Richardson magically suits up, then you want to run clear. You got to run like Forrest Gump. I know what love is, Jenna. You know, life is like a box of chocolates type deal. Shout out to Lieutenant Dan. Josh Downs, sorry about that. That was fucking bad. My Forrest Gump impression isn't very good. But Josh Downs going up against the Jaguars, it's a great spot. It just all relies on Flacco. Now, I know, Nick, Josh Downs outscored Michael Pittman last week. If you just take the points from last week and assume that's going to happen every single week, you will never be successful playing fantasy football. You just never will. Same reason was, oh, this guy was the wide receiver 3 last year, so why do you have him ranked lower? Because every year is fucking different. Every game is different. You're talking about matchups. You're talking about practice. We're talking about a matchup up against the Jaguars that I really like. But last week, he really popped off. And while I could see it again, I think the more realistic projection is he finishes in this range over just barrel rolling him all the way up to the top and as a high-end wide receiver too. Next tier we move here is tier number 5, and it brings great sadness on my end to throw Tyreek Hill into this range. My guy, the cheetah of the Miami Dolphins. I love Tyreek Hill. He is the best player I have ever seen suit up as a Miami Dolphin. I was too young to watch Dan Marino. I was too young to watch some of these great players that everyone loves, from back in the day. My age, Ricky Williams was great. Jay Ajayi was awesome. Jarvis Landry. And then Jason Taylor, guys on defense, Zach Thomas. But Tyreek is truly legendary for the Dolphins. It's truly something beautiful to see. But the quarterback situation has completely ruined any upside or any safety out of Tyreek, because I guess the upside's still there, right? He could just magically catch a slant or a bubble screen and go straight to the cribbo, but he's been outside the top 50 in 3 straight weeks. Once Tua returns up against the Colts, it's time to get bricked up if you're a Tyreek Hill owner, but as of right now, you got to run to the hills. You probably don't want to play him. Now, hopefully Mike McDaniel went to the drawing board and he told the offensive coordinator, hey, maybe we shouldn't run the offense how we ran it last week. Why is that? Because only Tua can run this offense. Tua is the guy that can make the accurate throws, the accurate reads, throw it to where a guy should be. Right? Hey, Tyreek should be here. Meanwhile, Tyler Huntley is throwing up fucking prayers. He's praying to the gods as he lets go of the football and hoping it hits Tyreek, and he missed on multiple touchdown plays. So with Huntley under center, maybe they gel better in practice this week. Maybe they figure it out, right? He's Tyreek fucking Hill. He's really good. But with Tyler Huntley, with Mike McDaniel being such a stooge, it's so annoying. I just want to shake my microphone. I want to shake Mike McDaniel down like what Tony Soprano did to the dude that was addicted to gambling, if you remember that, where he goes into the guy's office and fucking shakes him down and yells at him. He's spitting in his face. That's what I want to do to Mike McDaniel, because this bastard is fucking with my favorite team. Next up, we move to Vista, Brandon Ayuk. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Nick, he's going up against the Cardinals. Why is he not ranked higher? It's simple. He hasn't done anything this season. Now, I know you can't just assume that because he's been bad this season, Nick. You just said that. You can't just assume because he's been bad this season, he's going to be bad again. No shit, Sherlock. But I still don't believe it. I love Brandon Ayuk. I think he's great. But he hasn't done anything through 4 games. It's not like, oh, it's just been 1 game. It's not just, oh, it's not 2 games, 3 games. It's been 4 fucking games. There's 17 games on the season. 4, 8, 12, 15, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Basically, I'm sorry, I'm not good at math. Basically, 1/4 of the season down the drain. And people are like, Nick, you're stupid. You can't do that simple math. I am stupid sometimes. It's 8 o'clock. I'm recording this, okay? I barely slept last night. Arizona Cardinals defense is trash. It's trash. More holes than the spaghetti drainer. But Brandon Ayuk hasn't done anything, so I'm not ranking him higher. Sorry. If there was a game for him to break out, it'd be this one. But I also said that against the Rams, and he didn't do anything. So next up, we move to Xavier. Somebody thought you might get going up against the Chicago Bears in Chicago. Now, holding an absolute W, Jameis Winston style, fucking slam dunking Giannis Antetokounmpo style, Aaron Gordon style, hitting a home run, Pete Alonso style, great home run for him yesterday up against the Brewers, getting a W for my Mets, if anyone watches baseball. But wide receiver 13, now obviously being the wide receiver 13 is impressive, but you have to keep in mind the situation. He went up against the fucking Bengals. The Bengals defense isn't worth shit. The Bears defense is way better. So while he was the wide receiver 13 last week, and while I think he's the clear number 2 target on this team behind Deontay Johnson, I'm not ready to fully get down on my knees and glaze this guy. Next up, we got another Xavier, and we ain't talking about the dude in the wheelchair, Professor X. We got Xavier Worthy. Now, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to go to the comment section and type at a rapid rate and say, Nick, there's no Rashee Rice. Nick, there's no Hollywood Brown. Nick, Juju might be the wide receiver 2. How do you not have Xavier Worthy ranked higher? And it's very, very, very simple. As easy as 1, 2, 3. Xavier Worthy does not profile as an alpha wide receiver. Xavier Worthy does not profile as a guy that gets 8+ targets a game. Now, could he do it? Yes. Could he do it? Yes. But I'm not going to project that. I still think he's a 3-4 target guy a week with a couple of rushes, with the ability to have a huge game because he's faster than Usain Bolt. He's faster than my guy Lightning McQueen. But very clear, as of right now, even last week when Rashee Rice got whacked, big pussy style, that Xavier Worthy wasn't just instantly jolted into being the clear number 1. Now, with another week of game planning, the game's on Monday, maybe the fat bastard Andy Reid hooks something up here. Very possible. But as of right now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like, oh, he's going to get 10 targets this game like Rashee Rice would. No, he's not. Courtland Sutton's up next. Now, to be honest with you, I don't really want to play Courtland Sutton, but he's been a top 32 wide receiver in back-to-back games, and he's playing up against the Raiders, who I don't think has a very good defense. Now, Bo Nix, has he been great? No, he's been okay. I don't know what Sean Payton's doing. Sean Payton isn't cooking like I thought he would. Bo Nix has been okay, like I said. He's been feeding Courtland Sutton, though. 12 targets in week 1, then 4 in week 2 against Pittsburgh, but then 11 and 9. So if you're going to get 8+ targets every single week, if you could get over 10 targets every single week, then eventually you're going to have a big game. Eventually, you're going to score that touchdown, get over 100 yards. Now, I can't fully jump on board with Courtland Sutton until Bo Nix starts playing better, but as of right now, he feels fine in this range. Next up, we got Jordan Addison-Ray, wide receiver of the cold like Minnesota Vikings, going up against the Jets. Now, in both games he's played, he's had 4 targets. Now, one of those games, he had an injury up against the Giants, and then he missed multiple games. Then he came back from the injury. He scored 2 touchdowns last week on 5 total touches. Is Jordan Addison good? Yes. Is Jordan Addison fast? Yes. Is the Jets matchup tough? Yes. Do I trust Jordan Addison? No. That's how I feel. They still have Jalen Naylor. They still like to use the tight ends, and they have Aaron Jones back there as well. If the matchup was better, I'd move him up higher. I think he could still have a great game against the Jets because of his upside, but I think he cools down a little bit in this game. Next up, we move to Jerry Jeudy going up against the Commanders in Washington. Jerry Jeudy has been a top 33 receiver in 3 of 4 games. He's a good bet to get you 10 to 14 points. Against the Commanders, maybe this is his big showing, but again, It's hard to really believe in anyone when Deshaun Watson is their quarterback. I think Judy's a safe bet this week. But again, you always want to go with safety. Sure, like, Jerry Jeudy is way safer than Jordan Addison, right? He's way safer than Xavier Worthy. He's way safer than Xavier Legette. But those guys could all go nuclear, whereas I don't really see Jerry Jeudy doing that. Next guy, we got Jacoby Myers of the Las Vegas Raiders going up against the Denver Broncos in Denver. No Davante Adams with him playing games on Instagram. Ooh, Edgar Allan Poe. Does that mean I'm going to be a Baltimore Raven because he wrote the Ravens? Real fucking funny, buddy. That would be insane, though. Imagine Lamar, Davante Adams, and Derrick Henry. Oh, man, I'm just getting chubbed up thinking about it. I love Davante Adams. I love Jacoby Myers, too, though. I've always been a fan of Jacoby Myers, and I took him a lot late in best ball drafts on Underdog, promo code Notorious. Link in the video description. Again, make sure you guys get your free pick of Dak Prescott higher than half of a total yard, plus a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Again, promo code Notorious, or click on the link in the video description. But the reason why I drafted him was because I thought there was a sprinkle of a chance that Davante Adams gets traded. Now, Davante Adams didn't play last week, and Jacoby Myers didn't show out, but he's had back-to-back weeks with 9 or more targets. I get that Gardner Minshew reeks to high heaven, but he was the wide receiver 9 in week number 3. The matchup here against the Broncos, though, is rough, so I can't move him up higher. Next up, we move on into the final tier here, and this is just the, basically, you're throwing shit against the wall, right? Everyone's on bye. My players are hurt. Everyone's injured. Everything's gone wrong. Mayday, DEFCON 1. Boom, Keon Coleman. No Khalil Shakira. Maybe Curtis Samuel steps up, but we haven't seen him do anything this season. I think Keon Coleman could get fed like a fat kid at a buffet, or like Eddie Lacy at a Chinese buffet. I like Keon Coleman, the talent. He has struggled to separate. He's struggled to earn targets. But now it almost feels like the targets are just going to be gift wrapped to him. Next up is Allen Lazard. Now, I understand that he's not on the graphic. He should be on the graphic. I don't know why the graphic messed up. I'll just have to fire my intern again. It is what it is, though. Shout out to my interns. Allen Lazard going up against the Minnesota Vikings in Minnesota. Bad matchup. The only reason why he's ranked here is because he scored in both primetime games, and this is a primetime game. Next up, we got Roma Dunze going up against the Carolina Panthers. Now, while the targets aren't guaranteed, the upside is very evident there. He was the wide receiver 7 just 2 weeks ago up against the Colts in Indianapolis. The matchup here against the Carolina Panthers is great. Shout out Togi the Tiger, but I do not believe that he is safe by any means. Tank Dell, very similar thing. Solid matchup up against the Buffalo Bills. Problem, they have Diggs, they have Nico Collins, so the targets aren't guaranteed, but the upside is there. Keenan Allen, same thing. Targets, week 1, off the chain. Then he comes back, just 3 targets. I kind of want to see how this kind of plays out between Adunze and Allen before we rank him higher. Then we got Jalen Waddle just being let down by the quarterback play, but he's Jalen Waddle, so he could pop off. And then Tyler Lockett, he's probably the safest guy in this range going up against the Cardinals. We are going to see Tyler Lockett see a bunch of potential targets here. He's had 8 or more targets in 2 games, 7 or more targets in 3 games. So he gets targeted, but he just doesn't really do anything with them, but he should finish inside of the top 40 range. So thank you guys all so much for watching. If you did end up enjoying today's video, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button down below like it owes you some money. Leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. Make sure you guys do check out Underdog, promo code Notorious, to get that free pick, plus a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Check out any of the videos on your screen if you haven't seen them already. I love you guys all so much. See you guys very, very soon. Good boy!